Hello, everyone. My name's Tiffany. I'm the Tipsy artist. And today we are going to be painting this beautiful Highland cow for Christmas. This is from one of my studio classes. So we do a much larger version here. And then online, I do the smaller version that goes with my painting kit. So I just wanted to give you a little peek at this first. And then we're going to switch gears and switch camera views. Then I also wanted to just say hello. We're going to switch camera views and go over to more of like a fun aerial view so that you can see everything close up. And then we're going to get started right away. So let's have fun. All right, here we go. I'm going to put on my little peepers here and switch views. All right, there we go. I'm all set up. Get seated. All right. So on our website, we have these beautiful painting kits that come with everything that you need, the line art and all the supplies. And so I've worked ahead a little bit and I have everything that you need here. But let's go ahead and talk about what I've done so far. So you do have the line art that comes with your kit and then a pencil and a Sharpie and all of that, and even the transfer paper and the canvas and the paint and all the goodies and the brushes. So the only thing that you really have to get started will be water and a cup, but everything else is supplied for you. There's even a fun little apron in there. And then what I have done so far is I go ahead and I just position the transfer paper kind of in the center here. I tape just up at the top. I leave the transfer paper free and loose so that I can always lift up and check my work and make sure that I did get all the details. And I do that with a pencil over all the line art, and then that will transfer the image. Let me see here. So basically, you've got your pencil that comes with your kit, and then you just draw over the line, and it's just as simple as that. And then it will transfer that line. And then once I've got that line done, then I come back in with the Sharpie, which is in your kit as well. And I go ahead and do a hard line over that surface area. And it will actually end up serving you very well. It does initially bleed through some of the paint a little bit, but that way you never lose your trace. And it will actually serve you very well as a shadow underneath the paint. So it's really a great tool. It's also great for coming back in and doing little fine details like nostrils and eyes and things like that too on the Highland cow. So it's definitely very, very helpful. All right, so I did go ahead and work ahead so you wouldn't have to just watch me do all that tedious drawing work, but that's done. So I'm going to go ahead and lift this off and we're all ready to move on to the fun part, the painting part. All right, so I've got my water, I've got the napkin, your brushes. Let's go ahead and introduce you to your brushes here. We've got Mama Brush here, and then we have Little Buddy, and then we have Little Bit. So Little Bit's got the little fine point for your lining work. Then I've got my little paint plates here. This is what we'll use for a palette. You'll also have a smaller color visual that you can use to reference, in addition to always being able to see me here on YouTube. And then your paint kit. So you've got your paints here, 12 beautiful acrylic paints. These are really good quality. So these are all ready to go. I did do a little bit of pre-squirting here with some titanium white and Mars black. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about how to open the paint because we're going to get started with our blue first. So I'm going to be using the primary cyan blue. And when you go to open these up, you're going to see a lovely little silver foil liner. This helps protect the paint and it keeps it nice and secure, long lasting, keeps the air out because acrylic paint does set up and dry pretty quickly. And so this way, you don't have to worry about that paint spoiling on you and drying up. So I'm going to go ahead and take my primary cyan blue and we're going to just squeeze out like a little dollop And it's about a dime size amount. We're going to start with that. And then really important, make sure and recap so that we keep our paints nice and fresh. And then of course we have our titanium white that comes in your kit. We're going to go ahead and squirt out like a quarter size dollop of that. And then I'll also be using a little bit of the Mars Black. And again, just about a dime size dollop of that. I have that over here. It's a little bit hard to see on the black, but that's there for you. All right, so to begin with, we're going to go ahead and start on our background first. I'm going to start with the Mama brush. Your brushes will be brand new, so we want to go ahead and give them a little dip here in the swimming pool. That's our little water. So there goes Mama. She's going to take a little swim, spin around and around. Then I'm going to go ahead and just kind of pat her dry here. She is just moist, ready to use. It also gives her a little bit of flexibility when she's got that moisture. So she is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start to mix up a little bit of paint. I'm going to kind of use her kind of like a scoop or a shovel, and I'm going to pick up a nice little dollop of the white. Kind of push that off to the side here. And then we're going to just pick up a little tiny corner. Just think of it like a little pea size amount. We're going to work that in. That will start to give us a beautiful light sky blue. And you can make this a bit more intense by pushing into a little bit more blue. You can darken it a little bit. And so if you're trying to match the color in your house, you can, certainly adjust a little bit. You can go lighter, darker, just kind of according to your taste. And then to have a little bit of a slate quality, you just want to be really cautious with the amount of black. You just want to barely touch the corner of your brush into the black, but you can push that in and you can see how that gives it a gray quality or a slate blue quality. So that's very lovely. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start to work in a little bit of our texture in here. I'm going to put my water cup here. So the texture here will feel like you're making the letter X over and over again. Lots of wonderful texture here. Just kind of crisscross that brush back and forth. And I definitely want a little bit more texture happening in my sky. So some of this mixing is kind of a playful dance back and forth with the pure colors on the canvas. So as I'm working, I'm going to go ahead and take the same brush. I'm going to dip into that pure blue and push that back and forth. See, that's lovely. So we love that texture that's created. So again, I'll kind of dip into that pure blue, crisscross back and forth. And even a little bit of that white, kind of crisscross that back and forth as well. Also, if you're really struggling with having peekaboo on the canvas, let me pull the camera. So this would be peekaboo, where that canvas is just really struggling. You're struggling a little bit. You keep seeing canvas through there. A couple of different solutions here. With a base coat of paint, you can always add a little bit more water, and that will make the paint more fluid and it will help that paint really flow into the pores of the canvas. So you can see there, I didn't actually add more paint. I added a little bit more water, and that made that paint really just flow into every single little crevice of the canvas. So that was just by adding a little bit of water. Also is just more paint. So we can certainly come back in and just continue to add another layer of the paint. So it could be that you don't have enough paint on your brush. So those are a couple of very helpful solutions there. And again, just keep thinking crisscross back and forth, lots of repetition here. And then remember to be mindful about constantly going back in to those additional pure colors and working those back into the surface area. So I'll continue to add a little bit of variety as I go, and I'll keep pushing into a little bit of blue, a little bit of white, and a little bit of that medium sky blue or slate blue that we mixed up. So that will just create some nice variety here. And this is a really wonderful therapeutic part of the process, as we have a nice large open area to work into. Again, just have fun with it and be free and just kind of crisscross back and forth. We love that texture in the sky. All right, now we're getting real close to our trace. And by that, I mean the shape here. So I need to start to think about cut-in work a little bit because Mama, while she is lovely for the bigger areas, she can be a little bit too big to work in around these gracefully. And so we'll want to go ahead and do a little bit of cut in with a smaller brush. So let's go ahead and talk about how to do that. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and let Mama rest in the water here because I do not want her to get dried out with the paint on the brush. So just let her rest there. Let's go ahead and use our little bit brush. Now my little bit's very stiff because it's brand new. So I'm going to go ahead and give a bit of a swim here as well. Swirl round and round. So I have all those bristles all loose. Let's do a little pat dry. And we're good to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and twirl into this medium shade. So got it twirled in there, loaded up. As I twirl the head of the brush into the paint, it will load that brush up with paint, but it also twirls it into a nice fine point. So that is going to be very helpful. So I'll use this to go ahead and do my cut-in work around this horn because it's a tiny little curve there. Now, definitely adding a little bit of water to this part will help that paint become a bit more fluid and much easier for the cut-in work to occur as I start to work in and around that shape. So definitely add a little bit of water in here to the paint. And it'll be a lot more flexible for you and easier to move in those smaller sections with this smaller brush. So we can get just as close to it as we can. And again, holding the brush at this point, it feels a lot like just holding a pencil. You know, where that handle's just kind of going right up to the sky. Add a little bit more water. Go ahead and knock out a lot of that cut-in work. You don't have to be as precise about it near the fur because we're going to have a lot of overpaint with the fur over the sky. I'm going to do a little bit more mixing here. Do just a teeny little amount of black, and let's add some water. But I am going to be a bit more precise up and around the hat because this is definitely a very exact line as opposed to the fur is going to have a lot of fur that will come out into the foreground over the top of the sky in the background. Right, so this is going to be really helpful to go ahead and get this in place. Don't forget about that water to this step because it really does help with that paint becoming, again, as I said, more fluid, really flow into those pores of the canvas. And we just want that medium blue that we mixed up here. And then when we come back, we'll work on feathering in the rest of the background with a larger brush, our Mama brush. And let's go ahead and do this cut-in work here around a beautiful little star here. Tree. And then the tree is a lot like the fir. We're going to have a lot of like little wispies of the tree that will come out into the foreground over the sky. So it doesn't have to be super neat tidy there. It can be a little bit messy. I am being a bit more precise around the star though. It's looking beautiful. I think I've got all my cut in. Very exciting. Okay, I'm going to do a little swim here with my little bit brush. Nice and clean. Let's go and let a little bit rest. Okay, let's go back and get Mama. It's very full with water. I'm going to go ahead and do a little tap to kind of squeegee out that excess water there, and then we're going to go back in. Let's grab another dollop of the white, another dollop of the blue, and then a teeny amount of the black. And then let's go ahead and do a little bit more blue here. All right. So also, when I start to work this in now and I'm feathering this in, I want to be a little bit more mindful of turning my handle a bit more over to the side, parallel to the canvas. Add a little bit more of that blue, kind of push that back and forth. So we're working back into that line work that gets real close to the shape because we're going to do a little bit of an overlap over the top of that, kind of feather that back into the background. Again, just keep crisscrossing back and forth. Just keep thinking letter X over and over again. Crisscross back and forth. A little bit of white too. It's fun, very fun in the background. Adds some really nice texture. And again, to let it kind of have that nice texture that rests on the surface, holding that brush more over to the side gives you a more gentle hand, allows a little bit more of that texture to stay in place and rest on top of the surface, which is a nice desired effect. We don't necessarily want all of that added color to just blend in. We like for the different darker shades or lighter shades to peek out. So just keep crisscrossing this in, crisscross back and forth. Remember, if you see there's some peekaboo right there. So you can add a little bit of water to help make sure that that's completely covered. And then come back in with a little bit more paint, a little bit more of that, little touches of blue. Okay. Crisscross that back and forth to give that fun texture. Careful to still continue to crisscross it around here. And I'm watching my details so that I don't overpaint over all of like our horn. We don't want to lose our horns. I'm having fun, but I want to be a little bit careful as I get near that boundary to make sure and protect the shape. So crisscross back and forth. Over here. And again, your sky, every time I do this painting, my sky always looks a little bit different. So, but it can be kind of an intense, clear sky, or it can look a little bit stormy. And if you're not as big of a fan of the slate in there, you can just kind of do a little bit more of just the blue and the white. I love how it looks when I come back in with some pure white too. And then it can be a bit like, whoa, at first. You're like, oh no, what do I do? But just keep gently feathering it back and forth. And then that will, see, that'll bring in that subtle mix into the background. And here I kind of do teeny tiny little crisscrosses. And you can come in, darker in certain areas. Just gonna crisscross that back and forth. See a little bit of water, see a little bit of peekaboo right there. Real light hand. To get a lighter hand, more gentle hand, make sure and watch that handle. Should be going more out to the side, parallel to the canvas. That'll give you more of that gentle light hand to do this soft blending over the top. When you find that you're over blending or having too heavy of a hand, watch your handle because usually the handle's coming up towards you. That's going to give you a heavier hand. But out to the side will give you a more gentle hand. I'm going to add a bit more of this just pure blue in here. Just kind of crisscross that back and forth, just giving us some really pretty texture here in the background. And I kind of like to be a little bit random with it and spread that around. I'll put a bit more of that up here. Crisscross that back and forth. Remember, you can do a bit more of the white too. That just looks like, potentially a little bit of some abstracted um, snowfall in the background, or maybe a little bit of cloud cover. Real light blend there, so crisscross back and forth. Again, I want to be kind of random with it. Make sure it's kind of all sprinkled and distributed all the way around. All right, and you can play with this for a really long time, but this gives us a really good foundation for our sky. All right, so the next thing I want to do is go ahead and work into our snow. So there's still just same color palette here because we're going to be working in um, the use of these darker shades with shadows, but we need to shift gears and become much lighter. So I am going to go ahead and rinse out Mama and then pat dry here. And we'll go ahead and start to just pick up some more of this pure white, pure titanium white. And we'll just work this right here. And then again, we want a little bit more of that shadow. So this is a little bit like lumpy and not perfect. So you can just barely touch the corner into those darker shades and kind of work that, just kind of crisscross that lightly back and forth. But I'm still going to continue that little crisscross back and forth with the white. And then to create that shadow, then I'll push into the same color that we used for the sky. So I have a little bit more shadow happening here in the ground. So I'm going to push a little bit more of that darker blue into the ground. These little feet are a little bit obscured by the snow here. I'll do a little bit of crisscrossing here, back and forth, and then I'll work back in the white. I crisscross that in, back and forth. And back in more white here and just crisscross that in just underneath that shadow. Underneath the body. Crisscross that back and forth. And you can always work back in a little bit more of that shadow too. Little tiny crisscrosses. Those little cross strokes are definitely your friend to give you the needed texture that you need. And you can go into just a little bit more of that pure blue in here in the snow. Quick little cross strokes back and forth. And then underneath the tree too, we have a little bit more of that shadow here. I'll work that in underneath the tree first. Maybe pat dry on the napkin to help release some of those darker shades. We're going to go back into more of the white, a lot lighter, and just push this back and forth. Just keep crisscrossing. A little bit more of that shadow continuing up on the side of the tree. Let's go light again. More of that snow. Crisscross back and forth. With the chunky snow up here. And again, this doesn't have to be real perfect right next to the tree. And then crisscross back and forth here. And just more of that white. And there's a little bit of the slate that's kind of playing in the white a little bit. That's okay. That's good to have a little bit. We don't necessarily want to be pure white. Needs to have a little bit of that look. And then you can create little random shadows. Just kind of crisscross those in. And have it just a little bit of snowfall. Just I'm a little thicker with the paint and leave some of it kind of chunky there. I pick up quite a bit on one flat side and just kind of barely lay it down to where it's got a little bit of thickness that's just allowed to rest on top of the canvas. All right, that's beautiful. Since we're using the same color, I'm going to go ahead and work in my white here, but I want to use a smaller brush, so I'm going to let Mama rest, and I'm going to come in with my little buddy. And we're going to go ahead and pick up some of that pure white, and we'll work this into top of the hat here. I'm going to go ahead and get my white down first. Just do a little tiny touch of that same sky color we use. See, that creates a little bit of that nice shadow. But it is mostly white. And just work this in. Go right over the top. And then wherever we see a little shadow, we'll use a little bit of that slate blue. So we have a little bit of a shadow here. Kind of work that in. A touch of it here. Just really all around the edges, we'll work in a little bit of that slate. And just little soft touches of it. And it almost looks like a little bit of a crease in that white. And I'll go ahead and pick back up a little bit more of the pure white. Just kind of gently lay that in over the top for some soft texture, almost like that little fur-like texture there. Okay, it's quite lovely. And then I'm going to go ahead and work in this little ball here as well. So there's our little ball. Still using Little Buddy. Grab a little slate here. Add just a little bit of color to that white because it's not really a pure white. There's a little bit of that hint of that slate to it. All right, quite lovely. Let's go ahead and rinse out Little Buddy. And then let Little Buddy dry. We also have our star, which is going to be that same color. So I've got my little bit brush and we're going to go ahead and go into, we're going to grab a little, just a teeny amount of the slate and white. We really want to lighten that up. So I'm grabbing a lot more of the white, do a little twirl. And let's grab a little bit of water here too, just to make it more fluid, easier to move. Do the little twirl. All right, let's go ahead and get that coat onto the star. Hold the brush just like you'd hold a pencil. And real gentle hand to get into that shape. And you can kind of lay it on the side too to get, I'm going to turn this just a little bit so I can get a better angle. Little pulls. Okay. All right, it's a great start. Let that set up a little bit. Rinse out. Let's go ahead and rinse out, Mama. Well, we're trying to get all that color out, so I do some pretty firm pressure, spin around and round and round, and that helps release the paint. And she is clear and ready for takeoff. Okay, way to go. All right, now, let's see, we're going to go ahead and do let's do our fur. Let's get some of that going. So I'm gonna let this go off to the side. And then let's grab some cadmium orange. Take off our little foil liner here. It's usually pretty easy, sometimes not. Good enough. All right, we'll dollop. Let's just gather. I'm going to play with lots of different colors, so I'm going to go ahead and do my cadmium yellow. See, that one was easy. That's the way it normally is. All right, cadmium yellow. And then let's grab some lemon yellow. There we go. And then we also have some cadmium red. So many fun colors in the cow. With that. And then I like to add a little bit of primary magenta as well. Those pink hues are fabulous for shadows. Do some of that. All right, the other thing that I want to do is I want to pre-mix some brown. So I'm going to do another spot of cadmium orange over here. And the mix with brown, you'll mix Mars black and cadmium orange together to make your brown. So I'm going to come back in, little buddy. I'm going to grab just a tiny amount of that black and we'll work into that cadmium orange and that makes our brown. So we have that nearby, so that will be nice. And since that's a nice little shadow, we can actually start with quite a bit of that. All right, so let's start with some shadow work here. So I've got my little buddy brush, little flat top here. And just underneath here, I'm going to do like quick little pulls down. Almost going to feel like making little dashes. And then when you get done with your vertical dash, then you'll just lift off with a light hand. So I just want to work in a little bit of this shadow work here. And then just around that little snowball, which is the end of the little hat, that is. Get some more of that little shadow work in here. Again, it's going to feel like little pushes and then lift off with a light hand. We're just going to work in that little bit of shadow. So this is the brown, which again is that mix of black and orange. And when you get towards the bottom here, you just do little tiny, just like lift off with a light hand. Quick little brush strokes. Okay. Then we have a little bit of shadow work that comes in here just underneath the hat. And just so quick little pulls. If you're real careful around your eyes, you don't want to lose your eyes. So I'm going to do quick little pulls with little buddy. And then there's definitely a little shadow, a little bit of shadow that comes underneath the ear here. And just quick little curves. So these little curves are going to feel almost like you're making like a little tiny parenthesis shape. There's that soft curve to it, or like a little hill. And so this is getting in that little shadow on the ear first. Do a soft curve or like a little parenthesis and then lift off with a light hand. Just a little bit of shadow in here. Let's go ahead and define that face shape. So I'm going to do a shadow in there. Shadow in here. Shadow in here. Careful around the eyes. Just a few little delicate pulls right through the center. And then let's go ahead and work in this ear on this side. So again, it's going to feel like little parentheses, parentheses. And then lift off with a light hand. Those soft little curves there. All right, so we've got a nice amount of shadow happening. Kind of feather this out a little bit lightly. All right, so now let's go ahead and rinse out. Yeah. Go back into some of those beautiful warm tones. Let's grab a little bit of white here from white, a little bit of titanium white. It's kind of nice to add that as an accent and sometimes go a little bit like peachy with it. So we're going to do some cadmium orange, a little bit of white. And a little bit of that primary yellow. And it's really pretty. And then let's go ahead and do quick little pulls here. And these little pulls have a little bit of a soft curve to them. So it's almost like you're making those little dashes again, then you lift off with a light hand. And you will have a little bit of a soft blend into that brown that you did, and that's wonderful. You want that. You want those to kind of softly transition between the two. So it's definitely good to pick up a little bit of that brown and have that happening now in the mix. So quick little pulls of this. We're still seeing that little shadow underneath, and then you can start to dip into your cadmium yellow in here as well and pull that in right over the top. For that orange, maybe a little bit of that red. And lots of just quick little dashes of paint, working that into the surface area. So we're getting our nice base coat of this down. Those thick little chunky sections of it. Light hand over the top to allow that paint to just be a thick little chunky textural amount, just little touches of it. And I'm still using Little Buddy because I want, big, thick, chunky amounts here. I'm gonna go a little bit of that primary magenta to give it a bit more of a darker shadow in here. Again, kind of keeping it chunky. Here in a little bit, though, I am going to switch to my little bit brush to make the fine little wispies with the hair. But right now, I'm still kind of getting those big chunky amounts. So a few of those in there. And then let's go ahead and do it like quick little pulls there of those lighter shades. Okay. Again, it feels like a little parentheses. And this is that cadmium yellow, lemon yellow, cadmium orange, all these beautiful warm tones we have coming in here. Every brush stroke has a little bit of a soft curve to it. All right, so I need to switch now to my little bit because that's becoming just a little bit too big. All right, so a little bit here, and we're going to go ahead and start to work in same color palette, but just, a little bit. So I'm gonna grab some water, do a little twirl, and even a little bit of white. There's always a lot more white than you realize in this mix. And the color, or I'm sorry, the brush stroke will feel kind of like, again, like that little parentheses. So parentheses, parentheses, and remember to kind of switch sides depending on, so like on this side, go to this side, switch sides and go this way. And then just, be real careful about coming in and around your eye in here. So you don't want to lose your cute little eyes. If you do, I mean, Highland cows, they often have their bangs covering their eyes. So it's not, it could be really cute that way too, but just try to be careful. With that lemon yellow, light little touch of that over the top. So now we're getting those teeny tiny little hair strokes, little soft curves, just lots of repetition now. And then, as I mentioned, so we had a lot of this little, like little parentheses, parentheses. And then sometimes it's going to feel like a little bit of a lazy S, as we start to work in and around, like there's our lazy S. Like, well, see, kind of got to come around that little nose shape. And then we go back to that parentheses, parentheses. And remember, lots of color mixing here on this, where you can go into the orange, the cadmium yellow, the bright lemon yellow. And then those are for your light, and then the white, and be real gentle around the eye. Do a little bit more brown here to kind of blend that in. A little bit of that lighter shade in here. And remember your shadow colors. Uh, the primary magenta is a great shadow color as well. And then the brown. I like to use a lot of the primary magenta too to make a shadow. It's a little bit more whimsical. And using a lot of white to kind of mix in to our cadmium orange makes a lovely peach color. And that's also just really, really pretty for the highlights. There's definitely a very playful like back and forth between the light and the dark, picking that up with your little bit brush. There's some of that pure white that's really pretty to pull that back in for a little highlight. Going in with a little bit more of that white to do those fine little wispies. And we had a bit more of the white up here too. And more of that lemon yellow. So let's do white and lemon yellow and pull in some of that up here at the top for a little bit more of that lighter fur. Tiny little pulls there. We have those lighter shades here as well, so you can kind of keep it lemon yellow and white, or you can even come in with some light pink too, which is really pretty, a bit different. I'm adding a few more of those little strokes around the face here. And just teeny tiny little brush strokes kind of go back and forth like that because the hair goes this way and then it goes this way a little bit. Sometimes if the brush gets a little bit too weighted with too much paint, then we have to rinse out, reload a little bit. Now I'm going to take my little bit brush and come back in with a little twirl into the brown. And then I'm going to work back in a few of these little shadows. Just tiny little wispies into the light. And work that into the texture again. Same thing here. I'll work a little bit with that dark brown, just a few of those into the ear. Bring back in a little bit of that shadow in the fur. Soft curves. Shadow right here. And red can also be a really pretty little shadow too, like a darker fur color that can come in. A little bit more of that red in here. Softly blending that into those lighter shades. A little bit of that lemon yellow and the white too for little highlights. So again, it's just a lot of back and forth with these beautiful colors to create the texture. I've got my brown. I'm going to go ahead and work back in a little bit more of this, just the shadow again. All right, that's looking really beautiful. Okay, so let's go ahead and with some of this shadow, let's go and start to work on the hat a little bit. So we've got dark shadows happening in the hat. So I've got my little bit brush and let's go ahead and do that brown and then work in a little bit of that crease. I do that overpaint over the top. And let's rinse out. Dry off. Let's go into some of that cadmium red. I still have some of that on my plate here in case you need to get more cadmium red. You can even mix a little bit of that primary magenta with it too. It just kind of makes the red a bit more cool. It's very warm to begin with. And then I'll just work this into that hat, a little Santa hat here. Softly blend a little bit with that brown. Give it a nice transition to that shadow. This over the top. And even that Sharpie line, again, that's just a nice little shadow for you. Everything's still working for us with the Sharpie. Some more cadmium red and primary magenta. And then we have that little brown as the shadow for those creases. And that's beautiful. And let's reflap. Right. I want a little bit of this, before I forget, I want a little bit more of this white to kind of pop out over the top of the fur. It's definitely coming in the foreground. And I had some of the fur kind of come in over the top. We don't want that. So this little fur ball. A little touch there. Perfect. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do a little bit of the nose. So we've got our, we'll grab a little bit more here of our titanium white. And our cadmium orange. We're going to mix those two together. And a little bit of that lemon yellow. And then a lot more white because we're going to really lighten this up. That to be pretty light and peachy. All right, light and peachy. Let's grab a little bit of water, mix that in, make that easy to work with. Do a little twirl on the end of the brush. And then we want to go ahead and work this in over the top of the nose. And I'm going to be careful to go around those nostrils. So very delicate touch, hold the brush, hold a little bit like a pencil. And you can see I have a little bit of slight overpaint over those nostrils, but that is okay because you have your Sharpie in your paint kit. And so you can go back and refine that and darken those in completely. You just want to be sure you do that whenever the paint is completely dry, because wet paint will kill your Sharpie instantly. So you only want to use your Sharpie on dry paint. That's just to help you keep your tools last longer. So, all right. So I've got all that lovely little peach color in. It's beautiful. Now we need to add a little bit of shadow. So we're going to use, I'm going to go ahead and just do a little wipe here on the napkin. Little tiny touch of that cadmium red. It's right there on the tip of the brush. And then right here in the beginning, or in the middle, sorry, of these little nostrils, just kind of sweep back and forth. Just kind of go swoosh back and forth here with that cadmium red right over the top of our peach. kind of looks like a big upside down triangle. So a little bit of a shadow. Lovely. And then in the mouth, there's a little bit of a shadow too. So again, a little bit of that cadmium red and a little bit of the brown. And we're just going to work that back and forth also. Quick little sweep. And it's just almost like a light wash of that color right over the top of the mouth. And then around the edges, I'm going to go back into a little touch of that brown, and I'm going to just kind of go back here over this with a little bit of that brown. Just refine that line. Rinse out. Go back into that lighter peach, kind of work back into that. Whoops, it's too much water. That happens. Actually, get a little teaching moment here. Just take your napkin and just come in from the top and just touch down on it. That'll lift it right up. And one more. There we go. Okay. All right. So, and then actually lifted up the color I wanted to, so that works. And then I want a little bit of a highlight up here at the top. So I'm going to do cadmium yellow and white. Cadmium yellow and white. And my little bit brush, just do another little twirl. And then let's do, it's almost going to feel like you're doing a little happy face here, like a little soft curve, that happy face. And that's just a little bit of accent on top of the nose in between those two nostrils. And then you can even do a little tinier touch of highlight of white right over the top. And that is subtle, but it is just a little bit of a highlight there. Let's rinse out, dry off. And then I'm going to go back in with a little touch of our brown. And I'm going to touch up my little nostrils here. So I'm going to be very delicate because I'm actually painting this into that shape. And again, if you struggle with a steady hand, you can always just let this completely dry and then just use your Sharpie to go ahead and fill that back in. All right, that is lovely. Okay. Now let's go ahead and work on our horns. Okay, so we're going to go back to this plate. Little bit brush. We have a lot of white. Actually, I'm going to take my little buddy. Let's grab some of this titanium white, place it near the brown. I also want a little bit of black nearby too. So I've got black nearby and a lot of white. And then some brown. So I've got all of that to play with. All right, so let's go ahead and do a little bit of our brown with the white. It's like a really, really light brown. Very light. Almost looks like a dirty white. And then I can work this into the horns here. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my little bit brush because maybe a little bit easier here. So let's do a little bit. Let's do a little twirl. And then we'll just work this into that shape. And just be real careful and patient and just barely kind of touch down on top of the canvas to work into that shape. Take this all the way around here. Again, this is white and brown in the color mix. And see, even that Sharpie line that we did earlier, that's still serving us really well as a nice shadow there. Again, white and brown. Yeah, a little bit of water here too to help make the paint more fluid. Let's do a little twirl in there. Perfect. Let's go ahead and go into this little tiny tip of the horn. Notice I use my pinky to kind of help brace my hand in here to help stabilize my hand. All right, really nice. And then we need some shadow on the base of the horn. So let's go ahead and take a little bit. We're going to dip right back into that darker brown. Be a little bit of black in there too. Add a little bit of water. Do a little twirl. And then here at the base, we're going to go ahead and work that shadow in. And it's going to just run the length of the horn. And the paint is still wet, so we have a nice transitional soft blend between the two. And then we'll just, as we pull up, we'll lift off with a light hand. So again, we're going to start with that blackish brown at the base, and it's working into that light brown that we just put on there because it's still wet. So we get a nice transitional fade between the two. So firm pressure as we pull up and then lift off with a light hand. Do a few more little runs up the horn here. Come in from this side as well. Up top, follow it with that blackish brown. And then you can always work back from the opposite side too. If you need to come back in, you come back into that light brown that you mixed up, and you can rework from the other direction too, to kind of have that soft transition from the other side, that soft blend. So we can work in from this direction too, and then work back and forth a little bit. All right, that is beautiful. Do a little bit more of this darker shadow right here around the edge. Okay. It's really pretty. All right, let's rinse out. Start to work on that beautiful tree a little bit here. So let's go back to our little buddy brush. grab. There's so many fun colors for the tree. So we have some Viridian. This is a gorgeous color. I'm going to go back to this other plate. Viridian. Just a little dime-sized dollop. And let's do some cadmium green. Remember to always recap these. They will protect your paint and you'll get many reuses out of it. Right, so another little dime-sized dollop there. And then a little accent here. This is also lovely bright yellow green. Dime size. Still have some white, still have some black. We're definitely going to need that. Okay. All right, and little buddy. So initially, the green here is a little bit like a sage quality. So we're going to go ahead and take our cadmium green. You can even do a little bit of that bright yellow. That is a bright yellow green. Bright yellow green, even a little bit of white. Always add a little bit of white to my green. It helps it cover better on the canvas. And then just a teeny amount of black. See, and that's going to give it a little bit of that gray quality. Start to do little pulls here. So I'll pull down a diagonal to each side and then lift off with a light hand. And then this Viridian is just really nice for like more of a little shadow in there. That's really pretty. Some dark shadow. So we're going to pull to this side first. And I'll pull to the opposite side. So quick little dash strokes that are diagonally down. And then you lift off with a light hand. And you kind of flick them a little bit up on the end too. It just kind of depends on how you like the shape, but you can have a little bit of it. You can go more down or you can have a little bit of a flip up. I like a little bit of a flip up. Wider at the base. A bit darker here at the base. So I add a little bit more of that Viridian. Even a little bit of the black can be a nice little shadow in here. So I have my pure black. Black's a really nice shadow in there. Really kind of gives it that dark pine look. So I'll keep that texture going just back and forth. All right, lots of beautiful shadow in there. So now we need to come back in with a little bit more of just the white highlight. So rinsed off Little Buddy, pat dry. Let's go ahead and come back in with a little more of the pure white. And with a real light touch, we're just going to barely kind of touch and sweep. That's going to let a little bit of that white just kind of rest right on the surface area. This looks like a little bit of snowfall resting on top. And you just kind of angle it back and forth, alternate. Just barely, touch the canvas with some of this. Just go back and forth. All right, that's looking really pretty. Let's go ahead and roll this out. And then we've got those fun little ornaments that we can do. Let's go back to our brights. And we have a purple in here. You can certainly do something with purple if you want. My model just has mainly the brights with the red and the yellow. So, but you're welcome to play and do completely different colors. But I'm going to go ahead and use a fun little trick here. So I'm going to use the end of the handle, not the bristle side, but the wooden side. And we're going to just dip straight into this color. So let's do some cadmium yellow. And then we'll just go straight forward and press. And that makes a beautiful little dot for our ornaments. And I can sprinkle these around. It's just that perfect way to make a little dot of color for an ornament. I'm going to do all of these first and just kind of sprinkle them evenly all the way around. But it works every time. This is kind of making all of your lights. So I do a lot more of the cadmium yellow in here. So we have a lot of that. We have a lot more lights than we do ornaments. So it's very pretty, and you can keep it simple and minimal that way, or you can add more color. It's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more color on mine. So I'm going to go into the cadmium red. Do a little bit of this primary magenta. A little bit of hot pink in there. Really pretty. I love it. Love it, love it. And then I want to go over my star one more time with just a little bit more of an accent. So you can keep it cool gray or you can add a golden tone to it. If you do a golden tone, you can use the cadmium yellow with a little bit of white. That just gives more of a golden tone and just kind of lightly come back in over the top of your little shining star here. Let's do one more little coat. Just gives you an option. And also just lay it right on the side of that cadmium yellow too, and just let that right on the side too for a little bit more of a chunkier look of color over the top. change positions here so I get better angle. There. Okay. A little bit more white here with little Betty. And a little bit more texture here over the top. I think we are done. The only thing we want to do now is sign our masterpiece. So, but yours comes with your little Sharpie. Again, you just want to make sure that it is completely dry down here. So again, our little Sharpie. And then you can sign right in here. So much easier to use the Sharpie. I love it. And then again, if you have any like little details that you need to fill in, we had, pre-done our eyes, so they're good. One other little thing I'll tell you about the eyes. Should have said this earlier before I signed it, but just now remembered. I did rework the dots in, with the Sharpie in the beginning. But if you want to come back in and do that at the end, let's just say you covered them all black and you want that little bit of personality with the little flash points for the sparkle in the eye. The best way to do that is use your pencil tip and you can dip that into the white paint. And we'll be really careful with it. And if you do happen to make it too big, you can always Sharpie back over it and just keep redoing it until you get it right. But just barely touch into that white, very tiny dot of white. And then you can go right in over the top and just barely touch. And you just want to barely touch. See, and that gives that little personality. It's like a little sparkle in the eye. It's really fun. But definitely using the tip of the pencil is the way to go on that. Yay! I think we are done. Yes, I think. Let me look. Um, one other thing. All right, if you want to do a little bit of, you can leave it just the way it is, but if you want to do a little bit of snow in the background, there's a couple different ways to do it. You can add your little bit brush here and just do like quick little tiny touches of like a little bit of snow coming in the background, like as if it's coming down. Have a little bit of that happening. A few little gentle touches of that. Again, this is a little bit and just tiny little drags of the snow. It's like it's just coming down in the sky. It's like little tiny diagonal strokes. Very, very pretty. Okay. It just takes a little bit. That looks good. All right. All right, that is a beautiful painting right there. Okay. Well, we would love it if you would paint this with us. And for those of you who already bought the kit, thank you for joining us. And if you have not, and you would love to paint with us, we have the whole painting kit on our website at tipsyartist.com. So you can just get all the supplies that you need and do this complete process with all of those supplies. And that's about it. So I think we're done now. I'm going to look at it one more time. I think I'm good. All right. Thank you again for joining me. I hope y'all have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and that all your dreams come true. Much love to y'all. Toodles.